Hi there, welcome to this latest YouTube video. I'm just doing an alla prima oil painting. This one is mainly from memory. I saw this scene which will become evident as I paint along. You'll see what I was after, you'll see what I was trying to do. I saw this scene while I was out doing some plein air painting a couple of days before I painted this one, and while it was still fresh in my mind I thought I'd have a go at doing it in the studio, and I videoed it so you can all see. Basically here we've got a plywood panel which is approximately 30 by 15 centimeters. That's about 12 inches by 6 inches. It's a fairly thick panel. It's about an inch thick. It's an old offcut. When somebody was doing some building work, I had some offcuts, and yeah, very useful for painting onto, as long as they're primed properly. I primed it with a traditional gesso, so I sized it first, and then with the rabbit skin glue, and then I applied a traditional gesso whiting chalk and glue mix, which is my favourite way of preparing panels for painting on. I just love the preparation side of it. One day I may do a video on that. It's a messy, it's quite a fairly long, messy process, but I might do a video on it one day. So this is all alla prima, which means painted in one session, first time, so it's all painted in one go, one session. And the ground colour was just some old paint from a previous painting which was left on the palette. It was green. You can see me mixing there on my big glass palette on the desk, which I absolutely love. Although I look a bit hunchback there, I'll have to straighten that posture up, I think. But yeah, I use this green ground colour, just roughly painted on. I used to just use burnt sienna as a ground colour, but now I really don't mind what I use, to be honest. It's like a lucky dip. Just whatever colour is there, I just add it to the canvas or board and paint on it. I just pick up one that I quite like the look of, fancy doing that particular day, and I'll paint on it. This particular scene is actually Loe Bar, which I paint a lot, which is near Porthleven and Helston in Cornwall. It's very close to where I live, within walking distance, which was handy during lockdown when we weren't allowed to go too far. This is the rigger brush, and it's mainly meant for details, that is, but I use it. I don't really use it for details, really, not as it's intended. It's intended for painting the rigging and masts on tall ships. You see how I use it. I just like the length of the bristles, and you can just flick them backwards and forwards and create random shapes and marks. That's what I really like about it. So you can apply the paint, let's say paint going on there, and you can apply that fairly thickly over wet paint, and that's the advantage of this. That's why I really like this brush, for this wet in wet technique. So you've got lots of different marks you can make with it. Very versatile little brush. So you can twist and roll the paint on and flick it around on the end of the bristles as well, and you can paint details if needed. So this palette I'm using is the usual sort of a split primary palette. So you've got your 2 blues, 2 reds, 2 yellows. So your blues are generally, in my case, are cobalt and ultramarine. I've got a lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, and I've got a alizarin crimson or a magenta, and a cadmium red. And mixed in with that, I usually have a violet, Indian red quite often, and raw sienna. And I've started using ivory black more and more in the last 6 months or so. And sometimes I'll use a manganese or a cerulean blue for certain colours that I want to get, which I can't with the others. Every so often in a painting you'll see me pick up the palette knife, and unfortunately this one, it's a shame. I really had some nice brush marks up there. I wish I'd kept them in hindsight, but I sort of scraped them off as I was sort of blending with the knife. Look, there goes, nice brush mark there, all gone. How disappointing. But I just like to pick up the knife every so often just to blend things off and thin the paint. It's a way of thinning the paint so you can actually paint on top of it as it's wet. If it's getting a bit too thick, there's several methods you can use to remove that wet paint that's got a bit too thick and unworkable, and the palette knife is my preferred method. You can use a sheet of newspaper which you lay across the painting and just pat it gently down with your hands, and then you peel it off and it takes off all the excess paint, and you can start painting again, or you can just rub it out, scrape off and rub out with a rag. But I just generally prefer the palette knife method, just to blend and scrape back. And you can start to see this painting develop now. The whole point of this one was this lovely blue strip of bright blue strip of water which was there in the middle distance. So you've got Loe Bar in the foreground there with the surface. You've got Porthleven, the next headland, and then you've got Treharvest Head is the distant one, and you had that lovely bright blue strip which was the main idea of the painting. And as you can see, and you've probably seen if you've watched some videos of mine in the past, lots of continual messing around with different parts of the painting, constantly backwards and forwards and adjusting, taking things off, reapplying, trying different colours and different brush marks, rather than painting like a jigsaw, or in sections I should say. Yeah, I don't paint in sections. I like to work on the whole painting and develop it all in one go at the same time, rather than work in sections. I know some artists do like to section the painting off, finish one little section, move to the next, and so forth. I don't paint like that anymore. I used to years ago. Now I just prefer to work on everything as you'll see me do now. So 1 minute I'll be painting the top of the clouds, the highlights, then I'll shift it straight onto this part of the headland now with the same brush, so the brush just gets washed out with some non-odor terps, or terps if you're outdoors. It's washed off, wiped off with a rag, new paint goes on. Yeah, as with lots of my paintings, I probably only used 2 or 3 brushes for the whole painting. This is a filbert, just applying that, reapplying that blue, just making it quite intense over on the left hand side there, and there's the right, is making it a bit deeper there. I'm just putting a few sort of marks in, and there's the rigger, applying some opaque. This is a white which has been tinted with a little bit of cadmium yellow, and again, and the filbert comes out now, look. So we're just lightening that area behind that headland there to make it stand out more. And this is the rigger at its best, where you're just stroking on these random marks where the sort of waves are breaking, and different types of white. So you've got white, but you've added other colours to the white to just tint it. And there's just a few buildings, hints of buildings where Porthleven is, and the same over there towards Trevava's Head, just hinting at some of the cliffs and the cliff faces and the sort of nooks and crannies over there. I did quite a lot of sketching over in that Trevava's Head, that area where I'm painting now, just in between lockdowns. So I'll put a little link at the top right hand corner for you if you wanted to go and to see some of those videos. So we're just deepening the area around to the side of that nice bright blue strip, and that accentuates it quite nicely, I think. A lot of this is all from imagination or from previous sketches and paintings which I've done of this. I know this area very well, so I can almost paint that probably with my eyes closed. So this is all just a lot of imagination gone into this one, and just trying to remember what it was like on the day and getting an idea of it in paint, which is really good fun. And even better because this panel was probably destined for the skip anyway, so what better way to use it than do a little painting on it and not get too precious over it. So if it works, it works. If it didn't, it didn't. I find that way of working is great because it does free you up to try things. Nice soft bristle filbert there, just very gently laying the paint on top of the wet paint underneath. Now we're just starting to refine little areas now in the painting to bring it together and see if it is starting to look something like what I wanted it to when I first imagined doing it, or when I first thought about doing it. Stroking on some buildings. So there I've got my homemade marl stick, just an old batten which is probably about 3 feet long, and I use that to rest. I put one end on the easel and I rest my hand on the other, so that way I can do areas like this without risking going over into the sky, which I didn't really want to do at this point. It's all wet, so there we are again. You see, I can add any little details now, any little areas I want to just carefully put in, like where the tin mines are on the cliffs there, and there's the nooks and crannies, any buildings. It's very, very handy. This is just homemade, just a piece of wood, an old batten that was lying around. No need to go buying things like that. If you've got a piece of wood hanging around, make use of it. Again, just feathering a few edges of the clouds there with the point of the palette knife as we start to finish off the painting now. That's about it, and that's what we ended up with at the end of that session, which was, I quite enjoyed it, and that's what we ended up with when it was signed and ready for framing to go in the gallery. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one as much as I enjoyed painting it, and as always, thanks for watching and bye for now.